good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are online, on site. Many thanks for joining again. I hope you had a good night. We had a nice get-together here last night. I hope you had less wine than me, which helps usually early in the morning. How about you? Did you have a good night?
Yeah, good.
That sounds like fun. If you have missed out yesterday what our special colleagues here on stage are all about and what their role is, we've invited two rapporteurs for this annual conference to make sure we have decent participation, especially from people representing local actors in humanitarian action and the affected populations. And Anita from NEAR and Arbi from Aid Reimagined have shared views on the first conference day and will kick us off this morning as well and inspire us once again and share a bit with us what we might have missed yesterday. And for example, Arbi has been very straightforward last night in a highly appreciated way that we had very interesting discussions yesterday on the synergies and the overlaps and the very interesting points linking locally led humanitarian action, different ways of managing projects in humanitarian crisis, and digital tools and opportunities at the same time. Having said that, as for good reasons, we put that in the context of power balances and imbalances in the humanitarian sector, not having really touched on this topic appropriately, and maybe a bit not going into the debates about all these hot potatoes, which are sensitive, of course, also for actors here in the room. So are we maybe coming back to that one? What would be the key questions you would like us to discuss today and to make sure we really touch on these as well, on this maybe structural barriers to link these two topics better, to use the opportunities of digitalization also for participation and more locally led humanitarian action? What do we need to look at today?
No, thank you so much. I'm very excited with the topics today. I've looked at the agenda and we've got really interesting speakers. And it's linking both, right? It's now linking more both the digitalization and the more sort of like locally led aspect of humanitarian action. So that's really interesting. For me, what's interesting is the word agile has been used yesterday and also today it's going to be used again. And I have I have a mixed feelings about this word agile, especially because it's coming from the tech sector. I think one session today is about learning from the tech sector. I worked with an INGO a couple of years ago to develop a framework for their programs to help them develop an anti-racist and decolonial framework for their programs. And one of the aspects that I talked about is contrasting between excellence standards, or the standards that organizations use for themselves so that they can be excellent to respond to donor pressures and sectoral pressures, versus ethical standards, so standards that they can follow so that they can be more anti-racist and decolonial. And one of the juxtaposition that I use there is agile versus careful, because there's a lot of pressure to be agile, to respond fast, to, as humanitarians, we're used to just, fast, rapid response is a term that we use. But then that can lead to, why things are the way they are now. We've not really put a lot of thought, a lot of critical thought, and a lot of reflection. We've not valued maybe a sort of like slower, but more nurturing relationships with our partners. So I think this word agile would be really interesting, and how we can kind of like learn from the tech sector. I do believe that there is a role for kind of like non-humanitarian non-traditionally humanitarian actors. I think, we have a tendency to be isolated as an industry. We only think, humanitarian actors, we only speak to each other. So it's great that we're bringing in outside perspective, but how can we kind of like learn from that while still keeping a critical eye?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Many thanks. I mean, in which way agile could be used, or it could be done in a more agile and at the same time participatory way. That's surely something discussed today, and Darina is the key expert on that one, and will surely share her views and insights from her paper on that one. Maybe just quickly on power imbalances, Anita. What would you hope for, also given your background and all your great work with NEAR and your experiences dealing with the ones benefiting from the power balances as they are right now? What you hope for today, how they share perspectives, insights, maybe ideas how this could be changed from within the system, if that's possible?
Thank you, Ralph. Can you hear me?
Maybe you. Sorry for that.
It's okay. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here as well. Arby said something yesterday around the lines of, the challenges and barriers to localization are people problems, and that technology is a tool. It's not going to solve people problems. So I would hope that the international actors in the room are really absorbing the lessons and being able to interrogate at a personal level what learning can be brought back to your organization, what tools could be used to resolve the challenges your organization is facing, in including your partners in management meetings or working collaboratively on proposals or donor reports, using digital technologies to support reporting in multiple languages, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because there's that desire, that motivation that is needed in order to be able to use the solutions here that are being proposed and discussed to actually make change within the sector. And I think I was reflecting kind of overall on yesterday, and one of the things about digital tools is that advancements are being led not just from the global north, from the global south as well. I think that's something really interesting and exciting. And I know today we have panels that will be able to talk about that. I think there's an opportunity also for not very digitally savvy international humanitarian sector to learn from local organizations that are advancing in ways that you are not, and to like actively seek out the solutions that local and national organizations are working with. I think there's now more research than I knew of, as I saw yesterday, and I hope that all of you are going through those documents, as I will be, to try and mine some of those solutions.
Many thanks for that. Maybe touching quickly on one point in addition, which we might have underestimated yesterday, if you think so. Reading your CV and prep for the conference, I found interesting there is sort of a mission statement in your CV, and you said, "I'm committed to contributing to shaping a more effective aid system as part of NEAR." And I found that interesting because when we talk about more locally led action, it's a lot about participation, dignity, about the way we manage the system, but not often about effectiveness or even being cost efficient. Is this something we should look more and to be open to discuss as well? Or is there another reason why you put effective at the forefront of your mission?
Well, I think that humanitarianism, I am a humanitarian. I identify in some ways as a humanitarian because of my career. I think that effective humanitarian action is part of what we all are working for and towards. We all want these people who really are facing challenges and shocks in their communities to have what they need to address the challenges in their communities. That is I think what kind of unites everyone in this room and beyond in the virtual space. I think I see localization, I see the aim and the mission and vision of NEAR as, and the work of local actors as a central kind of driving component to make the humanitarian action more effective. I really, truly believe that. I think that, in fact, communities and the systems of response around them, NGOs, the local authorities, the volunteers, that they really need to be resourced appropriately and supported appropriately to do the work for their communities. And that, to me, is most effective. So, yeah, I think, sorry, that threw me a little bit, that question. The cost-effective thing, I have, caution around around this terminology, because I do not think that the shifts that we need to make are within the sector are in the short term necessarily going to cost less. I think actually, in order to rebalance the system, we need to be spending more and channeling and redirecting the money that's available within the humanitarian system to different sources. So yes, cost effective over the long term, but not cheaper.
In the first place, investments are needed. Avi has been tempted to comment as well, apparently, and then we wrap up.
No, sorry. I completely agree with you, right? And it's always interesting, this question of, are we pursuing localization or are we pursuing effectiveness, as if it's a kind of like a cost benefit or a trade-off. But we have evidence for this. So Dan Honig, who did his PhD in Harvard and wrote a book about his thesis, he's a quantitative economist, and he looked at 14,000 aid projects and then categorized them. One that is more kind of like locally led, where local actors are the decision makers, and one where there's more top-down. And what he found analyzing all of these projects is that the locally led projects are more effective, actually, in certain parameters, right? In large part because of the tacit knowledge of local actors, because they know their own context and reality. So we know that it's more effective if it's locally led. And in terms of cost effectiveness, there's a recent report that came out, and it's called the Economics of Humanitarian Aid or something like that. And it shows that locally led humanitarian action is more cost effective. So it's almost like, well, I wouldn't say not debate, but there is evidence here now to show really that what we knew all along, which is locally led humanitarian action, is more effective and can be more cost effective as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for inspiring us once again and kicking us off into our second day. We will hear again from you when we close in the afternoon, and we'll look forward to your frank opinions and straightforward feedback. Thank you so much, and with that I hand over to the first panel.
Hello.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and what time it is at your place. So we are panel 3, and the first panel for today. Our topic that we're going to have a discuss today is learning from the tech industry, the potential of participative management for equitable partnership in humanitarian action. So, but before we start with the introduction and maybe start with our discussion, maybe there's some housekeeping rules that I would like to just remind ourselves. The one who attended the session yesterday, so it's pretty much the same housekeeping rules that we're going to set for today. So the event is recorded, and the recording will be available on CHA website and the YouTube section. Online questions, comments, feedback are very welcome. And the one who are joining like online, they can do this through chat, using the chat option. And later on, before we close our discussion, these CHA colleague will be able to share those comments, feedback, questions with the panelists. And if you are facing any issue online, the tech support is also available. Again, use the chat option, and the colleague from CHA would be able to respond and hopefully resolve any tech issue. So with this, I'll just start with introduction. So I'll start with myself. My name is Zaki. I'm from Global South research-focused organization. We are located in Pakistan. So I'll just stop here, and then maybe Darina, if I come to you, if you can briefly introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you. My name is Darina Pilovska. I'm a research fellow at the Center for Humanitarian Action that we briefly call CHA.
Rajan, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Rajan Ghimire. I work with Multigen International as a country representative for Bangladesh, as well as I'm also the country program unit coordinator for Together program in Bangladesh. And I'm from Nepal.
Thank you, Rajan. Sonia.
Good morning. Svenja Meyer. I'm here for the German Federal Foreign Office for the Division of Humanitarian Assistance, Disaster Relief and Mine Action, and I'm the desk officer for our NGO partnerships and localization.
Thank you, Sonia. Dr. Shivangi.
Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Shivangi. I'm working with Welthunger Hilfe Bonn office. I'm heading a multi-country project, but based in India. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dr. Shivangi. So my role is more of a moderator here, but taking the opportunity, I'll also share something from a research firm based in Global South, because we heard yesterday some feedback, some inputs from the NGOs working from Global South and what sort of challenges, issues they face with the current project cycle management, the traditional project cycle management as it stands. So if I may share a few things that the research organization who are based in the Global South foresee or they go through. So to start from beginning, I mean, setting the agenda or the TU was the research itself. I mean, the Global South partners, I mean, they feel very strongly that their input or their role is very limited. In fact, if not, they don't have a role at all in that agenda setting, identifying the research topic sort of things. Even in the designing the overall approach or methodology to carry out the research, again, the role is there, but maybe that role is much more limited as compared to their other partners from the global north. Definitely in the data collection, they have very strong role over there, the Global South organizations. But when it comes to analysis, again, they feel their role is quite neglected or limited. And these are for different reasons. Sometimes it is considered that maybe the organization from Global South, they don't really have that capacity to analyze the data and come up with the findings which really reflect the situation. But maybe that's not the case always, and the Global South partners would like to have more role in analyzing the data. As a Global South, a person from a Global South, from a local organization, we do understand that the international organization, they have more holistic view of some of the topics, some of the issues, because they work maybe on the global spectrum, different countries. But then on the other hand, the local organization, they have more in-depth knowledge of that particular area that the research is being conducted. So And then more importantly, and this is something more I personally feel that as well, that's the data that is gathered for any research, which is primarily done by the local partner, but then that data is not available to the local organization for further analysis or for any further research. Because the contract are set up in a way that where the ownership of that data, that product, is rests with the partner from the north. And then some concerns also getting the due sort of acknowledgement on the research products, whether it's in the form of having their logos on the pages of the reports. But this is also some. So this is kind of challenges the research firm from the Global South would share. So with this, maybe if I can start off with our discussion, and Rajan, because you have a lot of experience working from international organization perspective and working more closely with the local organization for a very long time. So maybe if you can reflect and you can share your thoughts on how this traditional sort of project management cycle works and what sort of deficiencies, challenges, or opportunities you see. So over to you.
Thank you, Jackie. In this first segment, because I'm talking much more on the barriers side and then challenges side, and the next segment I would like to come a bit more on what the way forward and what the solutions that we have been practicing or we are looking for and what the learning that we have. I would like to bring that to the next segment. The first, like looking overall the barriers and challenges, I agree with the yesterday's first panel. It had been said, actually the power imbalance is there, and within the whole traditional way, the project cycle management on the humanity cycle whenever we look. Because there is a much more the rigid top-down management structure is there, number one. So this has been, reflected by all the partners during my almost 2 decades working in the sector. That what, I have realized and I have talked with the partners. Another also, the decisions has been centralized to one. So it really delays the things because it has been in one point, everything need to come over there. So this is also a type of barrier that, we have observed, we have seen. Looking over there, there is also the fear from the both sides. The local and national partner side also there is a fear because they're afraid to say whatever they want to say, because if they say, the international partner would end the contract or would say, okay, you are not a good, we'll look for the next one. Also, the international partners also are, they are afraid if they say there is a flexibility working over there, they might misuse the resources. So the fear in the both sides. So what I have seen, because there is a fear in the both sides, that resulted to have a type of, not a trustful communication and open communication with the partners. So that is the barrier because they fear one another, so they are not able to communicate openly. What happened, the result of that, if they are not communicating openly, means, ultimately, the accountability part, because whenever we talk about the joint accountability, there is no assurance of the joint accountability whenever you do not have, an open and transparent communication. Because the accountability from the international, actor and partners think to the donor side, the accountability of the local and national actor think to the community side, and it is not a type of a joint accountability mechanism to ensure the international actor has also accountability to the affected population, and even the local and national actor has the accountability to the donor, because there is sometimes, we look in a way within the traditional model, this whole the compliance issue of the international actors to the donor, and whole the compliance issue of the, the dealing with the local people with the, the local and national organizations. So this type of, the attitude, mentality, or thought process that we have. So what happened because of that? Whenever the issue of the risk it comes, there is no certain mechanism to share the risk. On what way? what percentage, in what level, that who is going to share. There are three, the dimensions of those, actors. If you see the donor, international actor, local and national actor. So there is no mechanism how are we going to share the risk. So within the traditional model. So we need to look from that point of view, the barriers, the gap that we have observed. Also, why this is all happening? Because of our whole attitude, how we have been dealing with the things. So whenever we do not change our thought process and attitude, it would be really, difficult to mitigate all the barriers over there, and it never ever, move towards the trustful relationship. And whenever there is no trustful relationship within the partners, then definitely there are a lot of components on the accountability part. Whenever we talk about the visibility also, we don't want to give that option. So there are so many others, the risk sharing part, how are we going to share it? So a lot of, the issues emerge then whenever there is no trustful relationship. So to have that whole mechanism and setup, that we need to look from different point of view. And in the next segment, I'm gonna come over there, so how we are dealing with that. So through our different interventions and pilot programming that we are having it, and definitely, we're gonna have a much more question and answer session as well later on, so we'll discuss much more. So how we are dealing with that issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajan. So you shared few very good points. I mean, I put a few of them here, the top-down sort of approach in the traditional model, the attitude sort of thing over there, and then the risk sharing, besides others you mentioned, and some I mentioned as well. So maybe it will be good if we go to Darina now from CHA, and listen to her, because she has done fabulous research on the agile management. And let's see if we have some solutions or some options over there. So over to you, Darina.
Thank you, and thank you also for calling my research fabulous. I don't think so, but what it really does is it reiterates basically some of the things that Rajan has just pointed out and that you also talked about. Within the framework of management thinking and management structures. And I have prepared a little presentation today that summarizes my research, and I hope to touch also upon some points that have already been raised. For those of you who have not came across the paper, you can scan the QR code, or you can also find a hard copy for those of you who are here in Berlin in the recreation area. So don't worry, it is also online upper, you'll find it. So what I did in this paper was basically I looked at the discussions about all the different barriers of equitable partnership that we have been identifying throughout the last couple of years, basically. And I chose to look into the structural barriers specifically. Because that is something that has been frequently mentioned to me by my local organizations and foremans as something that is really putting some everyday physical triggers and some tools and approaches that really contradicts equitable partnership in their day-to-day action. And what do I mean by structural barriers? Well, that's all of the humanitarian system, as we talk about as such, it involves an inherent top-down approach. I think Abi has been mentioning it towards leadership and the processes on all the procedures that we usually use when we pursue humanitarian projects. And it all comes with certain norms, standards, and definition and practices that are originating from many of the most influential actors in the humanitarian sphere, and not so much from local organizations and local actors. One very concrete example of these structures is the day-to-day project management that we engage when we plan design and implement humanitarian projects, and I consulted many humanitarian practitioners in Germany, Bangladesh, and South Sudan, and most of them really told me that still humanitarian projects are managed mostly following the traditional humanitarian project cycle management approach. And so I looked into the mechanisms behind it, and I found, well, basically the first two phases, the dialogue and design phases, actually have some equal, some mutual and transparent structures within them, because they are meant to actually allow the different stakeholders to come together on equal terms, to mutually agree and mutually discuss the different interests, capacities, and needs. And this, of course, also includes affected people, and transparently build a project upon these conversations. But you will not be surprised, as you are humanitarian practitioners, that most of my informants told me that well, this is rarely used in practice. These very equal structures are very rarely used in practice. Mostly humanitarian projects are responses to donor calls and donor strategies that are mostly based on different humanitarian response plans, and also other high-profile reports that are mainly coordinated by UN OCHA and other UN agencies. And one of my informants from a large international NGO said, this is because usually there is simply no money for needs assessments and analysis from other actors. Above that, most humanitarian projects need to run through some intermediary mechanism, may that be a country-based pool fund or an international organization, and these come with their own additional strategies and plans, and local actors have to respond to these on top of the donor requirements, right? And this leads to some sort of self-censorship. As one of my informants, I call him Paul here, from a local NGO in South Sudan, says, well, it leads to the fact that most of my colleagues just deliver towards whatever donor template they have and to which they are applying for, and do no longer think beyond that, and do no longer dare to introduce alternative thinking and alternative approaches. Well, the last point, which really reduces that these equal structures, or really hampers these equal structures, is that most of these dialogue and design phases just have a very limited time frame, right? You just have to have very little time to consult all the actors you want to consult, and this leads to the fact that often, especially local actors, drop out especially in the later feedback loops. And this leads to a fact that sometimes the whole project looks completely different at the end, apart from the initial proposal that was handed in by maybe some local actor. Now, after the dialogue and design phases, project cycle management goes on with some project formulation. And this is usually done by cascade of cooperation agreements that usually are bilateral agreements, first between some donor and then some intermediary function, be it an international NGO or a pooled fund, a financial mechanism, and then between these intermediary functions and local actors on the ground. And then, of course, these actors need to coordinate with affected people, but also other actors. And, well, this is actually a structure that replaces the equitable structures that have been in place before. So at the latest, at this stage, hierarchical roles and responsibilities are introduced that, of course, prevent equality. So no longer every partner is equal and has the same value. There is clearly the donor on the top, so everything is very donor-oriented. And as one informant said to me, well, this is projects become donor-led to the extent that sometimes we desperately try to respect the donor processes and procedures, as for example the logical frameworks and all the activities that come with it, even if this means that the project becomes less relevant and less effective. So here comes the effectiveness component that we talked about earlier as well. Secondly, this hierarchical setup places the intermediary function, the international organization, for example, over local ones. This sets them into the position that they can decide how they want to deal with all the other actors that come below them in the contractual hierarchy. They can choose to then apply an equal approach towards these partners, or to pass this hierarchical approach on. And what I found in my conversation was in South Sudan and Bangladesh was that, sadly, the latter is the case in most of the instances. And I wanted to share one quote from Gabriel, an international NGO. Well, when we work with local organizations, we only do so when we can make use of them, if we can have some added value, some advantage of that cooperation. And this practice of use and abuse also of local actors is really striking also in some other examples that have been mentioned to me. For example, in one instance, one local organization in South Sudan helped an international organization to win a multi-year funded project, but then got only annual contracts themselves. And at the same time, they always feared or felt that they were running the risk to be replaced at any time with any other local organization that was cheaper. And so some savings could be made at the side of the international organizations. Other instances are many other local organizations that constantly told me, well, we always fear to be kicked out for any inconvenience, for anything that doesn't run to the expectations of our local actors. And last but not least, this structure, of course, also involves missing links between some of the actors and puts other actors in so-called bridging positions. And what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, as you can see from this hierarchy, there is no direct link between donors and affected populations. And so there is a missing communication. It just has to run through different other actors that are in between. Secondly, of course, there is no direct link between the intermediary function and the affected people. And this sometimes also frustrates many of the actors. For example, Jonna from a CBO, a community-based organization in South Sudan, I cannot work very well because I'm blocked by all the stakeholders that are in between me and the donors at the top. And a German NGO representative said, well, that they are really frustrated that they don't have a direct feedback mechanism between themselves and local organizations. And last but not least, also they are frustrated by their own bridging position between themselves and their local partners, because they feel if something happens, then they will be pillared by the donors and not, the organization that is actually responsible for that. So if we summarize that, project cycle management does have some structures that would allow equitable partnership, but that are not used, then still it still has structures that prevent equitable partnership. Then we have to look into the management system itself and maybe try to look for alternatives. And one of the alternatives that I wanted to introduce here and wanted to talk about is agile management. And Shivangi will be talking a lot about her experiences with that regard. But I wanted just to say that it's not a new thought. Agile management is actually originating in the tech industry, but Groupe UAD, which is our sister think tank in France, already in 2019 applied this Agile manifesto from the tech industry to the humanitarian and development sector. And they said, well, it comes down to 4 core values. That is, we have to place individuals and interactions over standards, processes, procedures, and tools. Secondly, we need concrete and relevant products and services, not so much exhaustive project documentation and reporting. Thirdly, it's all about collaboration, cooperation between and with different stakeholders, and not so much about contract negotiation. And we should be responding to change and place that over following a plan. And Gruppe ÖRD has done a fabulous job and translated this also into various principles, and I don't want to read out all of them, but I just wanted to highlight some of the implication that this has. It has implications on the roles and responsibilities of each of the actors involved in the system, and it has implications for the processes and procedures of how we do humanitarian projects. So let's start with the roles and responsibilities. First of all, agile management puts all of the different actors into not so much a hierarchical order, but in another more equal order. It places international organizations or mechanisms, donors, and local organizations within one project team that is only there to serve their clients, their end users, which is the affected people. And doing that, they all have equal access to one another, equal access to resources, to information, and to each other to coordinate and cooperate with each other. So this is actually equitable partnership, right? And then agile management puts affected people in driving seats as it understands affected people as the actual project owners towards their vision and towards their needs. The project team is to contribute. And of course, this is really not easy to communicate between the two. So, for example, Scrum, which is one application of Agile, introduces the so-called Scrum Manager, which translates and facilitates the communication in the different languages, both technically and also, the different languages in the different countries, between the affected people and the more technical project team. So it's actually a facilitating role that many of us have been talking about earlier as well. And secondly, this Scrum Manager also facilitates all of the cooperation within the team. So it's their responsibility to make sure that everybody has access to the right capacities, has access to the right funding needs, has access to the right information that they need to do a great job and what they want to do. Now, just quickly on the different processes and procedures. Agile, as we heard earlier, is always referred to as something quick and some quick responses, but it's not that it has to be a short-term project. It's just a different approach towards how we handle projects. And it really breaks down this humanitarian project cycle from one very bulky, very inflexible cycle where we plan and discuss everything before and then just put it into practice, into smaller cycles of communication and exchange. So we can have a 3-year project, but it just has a very broad project objective, a very broad vision, and then we have smaller cycles of consultation as we break down this broad vision that we all want to work towards into concrete actions. And this, of course, allows a lot more flexibility. So yeah, just quickly to sum up, Agile management is about a team approach towards serving affected people, where everybody has an equal say and mutual and transparent access to each other. It's about local leadership, about putting affected populations into the driving seats, about serving them as end users and as clients, and about a facilitator role that we implement and that we need in order to make these conversations and communications possible. Last but not least, it's about a people-centered vision. So it's about an outcome-oriented way of working. We work towards a common goal and not so much towards concrete outputs. It's about a flexible implementation with different milestones that we agree in an iterative process. And it's about a piece of people-centered monitoring and accountability in the reporting. So we don't report towards donor templates, but we report towards the vision and the mission that we want to reach. Yeah, that's all from my side, and I hope this can really lead to an interesting discussion.
Thanks very much, Darina. That was very interesting, and thank you very much for at least showing us an alternative to what the traditional project cycle management is, which is a kind of a top-down, more bureaucratic, if I may say, and how to bring all those stakeholders together more in a team manner, and it's more equitable partnerships that can lead it to. Definitely, we will go to Dr. Shivangi before to listen from her experiences implementing some of those agile management sort of practices. But before that, I would like to bring in Sonia from GFFO, if she can share her thoughts as well.
Thank you, Zaki. Thank you also, Darina and Rajan, for your inputs and presentations. And I'm going to pick up also some of the points that you raised, particularly around accountability, of course, but then also around what you said, Darina, about timeliness and flexibility. Let me first of all maybe start with talking about quality partnerships or equitable partnerships and what this means for the German Federal Foreign Office in general, then before coming to how I think or we think that agile management can also add to that. So absolutely, Darina, and that was the point that you made, quality partnerships, communication should be a priority in how we do humanitarian assistance. And so far, the project design phases might enable for something like that, but do not always fulfill also the demands that we should have to that, or do not enable us to act as participatory as we should do that in the sense of localization. What the German Federal Foreign Office does is encouraging, of course, all of its partners to design projects as participatory as possible, to actively involve local actors throughout all stages of the project cycle, which means project design, which means needs assessment, which means implementation. But of course, it does not only come down to implementation. And this is probably where we should have a closer look at and how to improve really the involvement into all the other project design phases as well. This, of course, goes hand in hand with our Grand Bargain recommendations or our Grand Bargain commitments also on the role of intermediaries and Germany's engagement in the Grand Bargain and intermediary caucus, of course. So now, how could agile management add to that? And here I would like to pick up 2 points that Darina made. You made them in your paper, but we also discussed them in one workshop that we had at the German Federal Foreign Office, a workshop that Darina and the CHA implemented with us, where you basically have 2 thoughts. So one thing is, or what you do, what the paper does, and what we should do is name the structural barriers really that we see when it comes to participatory humanitarian assistance, and then also realization of agile management, and then looking at agile management as one possible approach in order to overcome these barriers or to tackle these impediments that we see. And I would like to elaborate upon both points a bit. First of all, what are structural barriers? Darina, you mentioned them. So, for example, we have certain reporting models. We have monitoring and evaluation requirements. We have timelines and log frames, and of course, the humanitarian response plans. So not only barriers that, for example, donor structures set, but barriers really that come with the whole humanitarian and international system. What that means for us is finding a good balance of agility or flexibility with all the structures and constraints that we have to work in. Time is one essential factor here. So do we have the time to absorb information and to engage in iterative processes? Do we have the capacities to do that in order really to deliver And that is actually the goal that we have, to deliver needs-based humanitarian assistance and then also enable for communication or collaboration in this context. The second very important point is, of course, accountability to the German public, to the parliament. And this, of course, entails transparency on the usage of funds, for example, and the possibility to steer. So these are all things that have to be really considered when we talk about how to make projects either more flexible or more agile, of course. Which doesn't mean that agility and the constraints that I just mentioned are like mutually exclusive, of course not. What we can do and what we already do is going for more flexible approaches, reducing earmarking in our projects, enabling for regional projects or multi-country projects, all with the aim to enable a quicker response to changing and developing needs and developments on the ground. This is, for example, maybe you are going to elaborate upon that later, what the Together project that we fund does through the HEUFA facility, so Humanitarian Operations and Innovations Facility, where we really have mechanisms to react to developments on the ground in particular country contexts, and then also have mechanisms to design measures or projects through the course of the Running Together project. So what we already can do is allowing for some agility and some flexibility. One other point on communication and consultations. Also related to the point of trust, Rajan, that you raised, I think, and the question of who is the project owner or who designs a project. So what is important in this agile context of flexibility of projects is, of course, to make sure that, or really to stress, one thing that I would also like to stress here, that the project is being designed by at least 3 actors, which is the local partner, the intermediary, but also the donor. This is important in terms of accountability that I just raised, but this is of course important as well when it comes to really using the different comparative advantages that these different actors have in order to make the project as effective as possible and best fit to the realities on the ground. And here's, of course, where a donor or an embassy, so not only the GFFO in Berlin, but the embassy in the particular country context can come in and help with communication, needs assessment, access, etc. So the point that I would really like to stress is we have to look at projects, at agile projects, but localization is really as a joint journey of all the 3 parties involved. On the approach of agile management, one last point maybe is one question that I would also like to raise, or one thing that I would be interested to hearing from the both of you maybe is, so if we say information and communication must be key for decision making, is it really agile management that enables for exactly this? Or can we also look at the traditional project cycle that we work in and show and see where we can plug in better mechanisms of communication or collaboration? So is the traditional way that we work in and participation mutually exclusive, or can we also find some balanced approach that really takes into account all the constraints that I already mentioned and all the advantages that really come with the better involvement and participation of all actors involved? That is what I would be interested to hear, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Thanks very much. With this, we move to Dr. Shivangi, and we know that she has already experienced implementing some of those aspects as agile management as entirety or with some adaptations. So let's hear from her that what's her feedback. What are the challenges in implementing them? What are the benefits she has already seen? and what could be the way forward she would suggest to all of us who are here. So over to you, Dr. Shivangi.
Thank you, Zaki. So maybe I pick up the last point mentioned by Sanya, that is it really the agile management that can improve the communication and information, or it's just that in the traditional way we can also do it? So I would say that as per my experience implementing the project in the agile setting, that it's the core value that this agile or agility really inculcate into the teams is that as a part of agile team, you don't have hierarchies. So if you lose the hierarchies, of course the communication can be improved. So this is the only I feel the challenge in the traditional way, that we have hierarchy. A country director says that how can you decide that you want to write the proposal without asking me? Who are you to decide? But however, in the agile project management, we say there is no country director, there is no field officer. We all are part of team, and as a team, we need to decide that we really want this funding, or we can really, plan this project in that area. So I feel that if we can practice that, we overcome the how should I say that, the hierarchical system, trusting the team more often, not thinking that they are the young people. How can a field officer really suggest me that this can work? I have worked in different countries. I have run several $1 million project. I have more experience than this guy. So I feel that what agility really brings with itself is more about trust, sharing responsibility, shifting of roles, not really sticking to your own designation, but really thinking that what other person in the team brings on the table as a benefit. So yeah, that's what I want to conclude on the point mentioned by Sanya. But in general, if I pick up some of the point from this morning and also from the yesterday when Julia was saying that being a implementation partner, you don't have a lot of freedom to really come up with a project plan or come up with a budget. The donor really comes, or the partner really comes and say that this is the only limit that you can plan certain activities. But I feel that we have been in Weltunga Hilfe, we are implementing a project. It's a multi-country project, and we started implementing Agile in the project management in 2019. It is not really exactly the tech thing, but we really tweaked that how we can pick some part of the agility in our regular project management that can improve our project implementation. So in agility, we have the sprint backlog, which is not really something different what we usually have in our regular project management, which is Gantt chart, but it is more about that sprint backlog. You have a list of activities, which Darina just mentioned, that rather than having a very broader objective, you break down your all small log frame objectives into the smaller ones so that it is more clear that what you really want to achieve by the end of the project. Then you have sprint. Sprint, if I pick up your discussion that we really want to be so rapid in our response, so we really decide that how quickly we want to really adapt to the changes on the field. So you commit a time. So you plan your week. Of course, we do it in the conventional projects management as well. But here, you allow team. You are not, as a project manager, deciding what team is going to do. Being a field officer, the field officer comes back to me that, okay, this is what I feel that can happen in the current situation as a part of activity. So this is the plan for a week. And then it gives more responsibility and accountability on the team, that because they are committing, they have to do it. If they can't do it, then they cannot blame to me that because you asked me to do this, I failed, I couldn't really deliver the project or the activities. Then going back to the product backlog, which is really from the agility framework, it is the log frame of the proposal. So you just translate different things of the agility in your day-to-day project, and you pick what works in your regular project management. So just giving a brief reflection that how agility has helped us as a Weltunga Hilfe in the project management is that in 2019-20, when the COVID really affected all of us. Our projects were also part of it. And I was heading a project. It is in 6 countries, 3 in Asia, 3 in Africa, different time zones. I'm based in India. Very difficult to really find out what the teams are doing when everybody's homebound, and all being a NGO, and especially the field NGO, all the activity has to be done on the field. And when it is a lockdown, what the hell the team are doing sitting in the office? So then this trust start coming up. So this agility really help us to trust our team that even if they are sitting at home, they are producing some output for the project. So this agility helped us being very transparent and being very trustful on your field team, your partners, who are sitting in Uganda or Malawi, Nepal, Zimbabwe, me sitting in India. So we used to frequent, I hardly get time to be on the field 100%, so I keep on traveling to the different countries. So what agility helps me, that these reviews, which we say that which happens every 3 weeks, I get to know what is happening in the project. And because agility has given us this freedom that I'm not the donor, or the person who is reporting to me is not my implementation partner, there is more openness. If something is failing, they are very much comfortable in expressing that this is not going to work on the field. And I think, again, giving a reflection on what Anita said yesterday, that we are not able to translate the language of our beneficiary in terms of digitally transforming them. I would like to say that in our project, we, as a part of agility, it again pushed us to be closer to the community. We opted a user-centric design thinking, where we really ask users, like the community or the client. Of course, yesterday ISC presented that we have moved from this way of really defining beneficiary, because when you define them as a beneficiary, they will always think that we are there to benefit them with some of the allowances or some of the distribution thing. But as a part of agility and design thinking, we always treat our community as a client. What do you need? What we should serve you? So we really, even if we have to design a module for how to really produce potatoes, we really go and reach out to them what exactly you want to know in terms of what you want to do in the farming of the potatoes. So I think this agility gives you a lot of flexibility to be more closer to the community, your implementation partners. They are sitting on the field. They can decide better. So, for example, if I give you another example, this morning, one of my partner from Uganda dropped me a message on WhatsApp. Hey, Shivangi, I saw this proposal call. Let's apply for this. I said, yes, please proceed. So these kind of attitude gives a lot of confidence and empowerment to the local partners, that yes, they also have the right, that what kind of projects they want to do, what kind of proposal they want to do. And as a Welthunga Hilfe, as a supporting agency, it gives a lot of freedom to me to have more time to technically really, have more time to support the teams, that, okay, this is the area that I can build your capacity on, maybe for the proposal writing, or maybe how to really have good communication skills to present your project, that it can really have more impression in the community. So this is just to give an example that as a part of head of project, I own the product, which is agility term. Product is like your own project. I own it, but I have this freedom for the partner project, partner staff, where the coordinator is the master, scrum master, who really coordinate within their team that what they are going to do. If in the LFA or in the log frame, we decided that as a part of midterm evaluation, we will do it after 6 months or maybe 1 year, but maybe as a part of team, they decide that what they want to do, if the situation is really allowing them to do it now or later, in what kind of settings. So yeah, in a nutshell, I would say that this agility has given a lot of scope and benefit to us to decide early on the failures. And talking about what Rajan was saying during the discussion, that who owns the risk. So agility also given us this space that together we have given and communicated this to our partners, Don't fear about failures. Don't think that we will blame partners, that it was you that really happened on the ground, but we share the responsibility. So we trust each other, and that give more room to, more exploration, better implementation, efficiency, and effectiveness. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shivangi. And if I may, set few bullet points from what you have shared. The key is that removing that hierarchy. I think that's the key message coming up from there. And that bureaucratic red tapes that needs to be taken out, freedom to the partners, to the community, trust, transparency, and that then makes it easier for you and make you more closer to the community, to the clients you want to serve. So I think these are fantastic takeaways. But before I come back to the panel, and if they have any reflection to share, maybe if I take the liberty and ask you, Dr. Shivangi, what are the key sort of challenges you have came across when you are implementing this this new approach? Because whenever we change something which is against the traditional settings, there are always some sort of challenges that we face, and how you overcome those challenges.
Very interesting question, and we still face those challenges when we talk about that. We explain to our local partners or even the country offices that that's how the project is going to roll out in the agile framework. So there is a lot of resistance because they feel that how can you really decide that this is not going to work? And when we have written something in the proposal, that means we have to do it. So the mindset of the organization that we cannot give freedom to our field officer to really decide that what kind of activities they can roll out. This was the biggest challenge, and also the power dynamics. Lately, last month only, I visited one of my partner office, and they said. I was just curious to know that, okay, do you have any challenges in the partnership maybe we can work on? And the CD was very open, saying that we don't really appreciate that you are so close to our project team. If you want to work with us, you just directly communicate with the country director. So, I mean, these kind of mindset that when you are implementing the project, it has to be the country director who should communicate and not really the field team, because they feel that we don't have that much space in the organization that a project coordinator is coming and telling me that we are applying for this proposal. They don't have freedom to express any kind of, bottleneck in the projects. So this hierarchy system that we have to keep on, saying to the CEOs or the country directors of the local NGOs that please step down, start trusting your teams, believe in them. So yeah, those are the most two difficult challenges that we always feel.
And this is very interesting. So it's not only the INGOs, or the donors, it's also for the local organization as well. They have to trust their team as well to make it happen. So thank you very much. Rajan, I think you wanted to share something here.
Thank you. Yes, definitely, as I have already shared some of the barriers or the challenges within the traditional structure, but we also have worked in the way forward, how to overcome that. So one of the example that from the Together program, so one of the program, it has been funded by the German Federal Foreign Office to 8 countries with, including the Germany's 9 countries. We have a 44 partner organizations. So it's a type of, the program initially, like it is a pilot, where we try to, overcome these, most of those challenges and barriers, try to, engage partners within the decision-making architecture to the global level and in the country level. And the program management and then intermediaries, with the 4 organizations, German organizations, we became like a facilitating. So we facilitate the decisions and the leadership, whatever the partners' leadership they are coming over there. So this is a type of, changing completely. Initially, it was really difficult because our mindset, already I agree with Shivangi, that, our mindset was not in a way, even the local organizations. So the attitude and mindsets are the very critical aspect whenever we talk about the agility or the flexibility or whatever the term we use. So this is the major thing. So it took time. Another also, within the governance, in the country governance level also, how we have done it, we have, the country steering committee from the partner organizations. Every month they sit together, they discuss what they have done it, what the project has done it, what the challenge they face, and how they can move forward. If there are challenges, how they're going to overcome the challenges. It is not us, the international organization, asking the partner, directing partner. They are having their own discussion, making the plan, and bringing that plan into the action. So all the monthly basis they are doing. At the global structure level also the same thing. The project advisory committee, every quarter, all the 8 countries among the partners, like each country, they have one representative to the global level structure. And our global level program management unit work as a secretariat to facilitate the things. The same thing in the country level, the country program unit work as the secretariat to facilitate decisions happen, and then the implementation happen over there smoothly. Another, very good thing that, what I have realized after working within the program, it took, a lot of time to build the trust with the partners. And all the time, sitting with them, meeting with them, having informal chats, not only the project related. So many times what happens whenever we only think about the project and program, the relationship and trust doesn't build. So we need to go beyond that scope. And it requires different type of skills and ability within the team. This also we have to understand. And this morning, during the breakfast, I was talking with one of the friend. She was also saying, this type of skills and ability and competencies, we never reflect and we never see in the CVs. Mm-hmm. So whenever we have the team, we don't know, what attitude, what perspective, what the different competencies the team is bringing there. Mm-hmm. So this is also important aspect that we try to see within the together how we facilitate. And we are not the people to decide and ask the partners to do, but they decide and say, oh, we are doing this. We need these resources. We need this type of, the capacities, you have to provide. That's how we provide based on their needs, their demand. The same thing, whenever they do the crisis response, we have given the flexibility within the team and country. Already, Sonia said that, definitely from the, this emergency fund, we call it the HOIFA, but easy to understand, is the small, pool fund among the partners at a country level. They decide themselves which, crisis to respond, how fast, they decide themselves. They rate it themselves, so they know how to even evaluate their own projects and proposals. So their skills and ability strengthen, and they're able to test themselves how fast they can do, what the challenge they have faced. They do the review jointly. So these all the aspects that it had been, put forward over there, which really started to build the trust among the partners and started to look the complementary action. So the partners among themselves, because they have different capacities, because we have a type of, the conception of thirds that, local partners, they don't have capacities, but actually they have different type of capacities there. Whenever they unite together, they have a platform to bring their own ideas, their expertise, the skills. They can do a lot by themselves. Only the role that we have, that what I have started to feel now, just to facilitate, bring these people together, say, okay, what you can offer, what you can offer, what you can offer. So let them work themselves. That is how in together we are trying to do it. Not only within the partners, we also try to bring the other networks, other, non-partner from the together, to bring them to the one platform. So they started to feel much more confident. So building confidence and then gradually developing leadership, that what I found is very essential. Looking the the localization point of view, localization the framework over there. And this let's see how it goes. Still we are in the pilot phase. We are learning a lot. We also have a lot of challenges that we face. We are gradually overcoming the challenges. Still a long way to go. And definitely, already Sonia said that, localization and then, humanitarian reform agenda is not, like easy go task. It's a long journey. So we are walking. So still is a marathon, very long marathon, and we have to go really long. We'll see where we can reach.
Thank you very much, Rajan. And I'm looking at the watch. It's 11:15. So before we open the floor for question and answer, is there any sort of reflections, any inputs further? Oh, do you want to go, Dr. Shivangi?
Yeah, so maybe I would like to add that it is, of course, as Radhan said, it is a long way to go. So one of the challenge that we face, though we are trying our best, and we also try. So as a agility, I think it has also transformed us as a person, that we are always open to express our challenges as well to the donor. So we don't fear that donor will say that, okay, you can't do the project. But I think somehow we have this mindset that let's only speak donor language. So I think the agility has also given us this scope that we also try to express to the donor. For example, this is a BMZ supported project. And while writing the project, we express that it will be implemented in the agility form. We will decide on the changes early on. So this gives us the opportunity that during the interim reports, we express this to the donor that this is what we committed, but we see that this is not moving on the field. So maybe we would like to have these changes. So the best part is that, yes, the donor is also trying to come on board, but it is taking a bit more time than what is required on the field. So this is also like one of the bottleneck during project implementation, that donors also doesn't really get why we need to be more flexible and agile, that what we write in the proposal is not a stepping stone. Over the period of time, if the situations evolve, we should also, need to get out of those mindset that no, what has been written has to be implemented. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Shivangi. So the floor is now open to question and answers, any feedback, comments. So the colleagues who are online, they can just drop their comments, feedback, questions in the chat, and the CHA colleague will then share them with the panel. The colleagues here in the hall, they are more than welcome to come in front and share their thoughts, questions, comments. So before we take questions, we have a few discussants with us in the room, and I will request them if they can share their views as well. So I'll request Mustafa Talha from Foundation for Human Rights and Freedoms and Humanitarian Relief, Turkey. So Mustafa, over to you. Maybe you take the other one. Still not working, so I don't know. You want to maybe use this one?
Now it's working? No. Is it now? Yeah. Yes. Okay, this is the third one. Thank you very much for all these interventions. Great. I was really impressed with Darina's work, I want to say, as a starter. And this is one of the sessions in my life that is going to has a lot of reflections on the work that we are doing in the field, especially coming from the experience, challenges, and also do some challenges from other contexts. So that was very relative. As a representative of a national NGO partnering with the international organization, I can relate a lot of points on that regard. And I don't want to repeat or give you an example on the same context, but I just want to add maybe another layer to that. We are talking about the partnership between the international entities and the national NGOs, but there is another invisible layer, which is so-called, sub-IP, sub-implementer partner, which, not even mentioned in anywhere in different platforms. And it is on the since we are talking about the power imbalance, especially with the help of technology, and yesterday RB mentioned about the grant management system. For example, in the grant management system, you have lots of details for your project as an implementing partner, as an IP, so-called. But for the sub-IP, you have like 3 sections, only the name, budget, and an Excel sheet of the, the partner. So this is like the system that we're talking about, and this is also making, not enabling us or even the equality between the partners, because the system basically doesn't allow your sub-IP to access to the system without your account. And basically you have to do it everything on behalf of them, but also the system keeps you accountable for everything. The same due diligence, not the same due diligence project, but same audit project, same process, same spot check process for the sub-IP. But you are, as a national partner, you are the only one which is responsible. We were talking about transferring the risk from donor to the international agency. Now there is the same thing, transferring risk from national to the national partner. I just wanted to mention this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Talha. Any reflection, or we go to our? Okay, we move to our next discussants. Corey from IFRC, please.
This works. Okay. Right. Yeah. I was just the point about like that really struck me with this agile management said like no hierarchy. It's such a utopia. But so I'd like to believe that it's okay. All right. Is this better? No. Technology doesn't work for me. Okay. Okay, that's better. Okay. Yeah. But I guess just a sense of caution as well in terms of like really sort of kind of understanding, like, you can't, first is about recognizing first. Your starting point should be recognizing and understanding that power imbalance exists. So that has to be, and that it's a long journey. It's not something that it's just kind of easily, done and dusted. And that power, it has many domains. It comes in different forms. It's not just about money. Power is about decision-making authority. It's about influence. It's about voice. So you have to be a bit more strategic. And also, in terms of addressing this issue on power and those hierarchies, other than trust, the actors should have the confidence and the courage. So for the part of the donors and international actors, the courage to let go, the courage to share, the courage to speak, to make change. And for local actors, it's the courage to not just to speak of, but to maybe to grab power, actually. Maybe because it may not be easily be let go. The agile management kind of approach, I'm looking at it as one of the approach that I think would really be useful as part of I've come across what they call complex adaptive systems versus the traditional hierarchical roles. So yeah, it could be that, but I think that it would only work if that approach is based or grounded on long-term strategic partnerships, because it can't be, it makes it essentially kind of useless. And then another last point is, as Svenja mentioned, about like, so what's a balanced approach, and how do we address those kind of issues? One answer was said about like the change the default for international actors, say as a facilitator and as a broker, but all in all, I think there's an importance of like also not losing sight of the long-term objective and goals. So localization is not an end in itself. It never is. It's a means to an end. The localization is like equitable partnership. So it's about delivering principled and effective humanitarian response. There's a tendency to kind of lose sight of the other half of that kind of like, of the discussion, so that we are just essentially, many are just speaking of localization, equitable partnership as an end in itself. So just that point. Yeah, I think those are just the few points. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Corey. So the floor is open for questions, and I mean we have, yeah. Come back to you.
Does this work? Yeah.
We take this one and then come back. All right. Yeah.
So I first want to thank you very much for today and for yesterday, because the topics and what has been raised is amazing, because it's not just what we hear here, it's just also when we process the idea and think like it makes sense. What shall we do about it? So that's why I would love to take Arbi and Anita's role. I want to comment, share openly somehow about some topics from yesterday and today. It's not questions, but it's something that came into my mind and I wanted to share. The first thing is that I come from Syria. I was working with the Syrian Arab Red Crescent 8 years during the crisis. And then now I joined the German Red Cross for 2 years. So I saw the part of the implementing during a crisis. And then I come here to see the partner, the donor part, why they do what they do. Yeah? And then with that, there is so much to share, I think. So one of the things, first, when I was a child, Syria was part of the third world countries. And later, during my studies, it became a developing country, part of the developing countries. And recently, we started hearing the global south. So Syria now is a global south. I don't know how much that changed or affected the situation of Syria. If there is some change, it's worse. So changing the names by itself, I don't know how much it helps. It's nice the intention to call the beneficiaries clients. I love the intention. You can call them kings and queens. If you don't change the way you do, I don't know how much change will happen to the, yeah? I don't think they care also. They really want, they want to be respected and treated as human beings. That's what matters, not what you call them. Especially when you translate this into other languages. It's horrible to call them clients in Arabic. Yeah, because, especially with so much corruption and stuff, it's not good. Yeah. The other thing is, speaking about technology and all the applications and systems it brings. It's tools. And tools is extension of the human ability. If there is no human ability, the tool cannot do nothing. So it's just a tool. And we keep hearing that, and it's true. It cannot solve problems by itself. And about causing harm, what I noticed, at least from my perspective, and at least in the humanitarian sector, I assure you 100% nobody of the humanitarians wants to cause harm in the countries we support and we work there. It's just they need to know more about the country and about the people and about the context. And I think we should help them understand better, because because they are not politicians and they don't want to cause harm, they want to help. Sometimes when the harm is caused, it's not because there is any intention for that. It's just they need to understand better. One more thing I want to share is, I noticed this in Germany. It's very easy for everybody in Germany to understand something. And then when we put a project or something and we know exactly everything is fine. And then we expect the country to just report and do the things the way, because it's easy. This is what we want. they operate in different, if it's a game, somebody in this level, somebody in that level. It doesn't work there. They don't work this way, they don't think this way, they don't deliver this way. And then you sit here expecting and you really put efforts to make it easy, so you really made it easy for them. But it's not easy. They have different way of understanding and doing, and they cannot perform. And then there will always be problems if we don't go to understand better, again, the context and the people. And this context and people, anything you do, because now we speak about things, but what we agree on in one country might be totally different or wrong in another country. So you need to always consider the context and always consider the people. It's really about the people at the end, with whom you are dealing and what they are doing.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really, I highly appreciated that you're sharing your thoughts. You have more points to share?
I want one suggestion, and this is because I am an information management and digitalization specialist. I think the information management can solve a very big problem. What we have here, decision makers are not aware of technologies because it's new. And they need somebody to translate their ideas. They think that technology can solve everything because they really don't know. They need somebody to translate their ideas to the tools and use it, yeah? And somebody to use those tools and bring ideas to them. This part could be covered by information management. We need to improve the information management in the humanitarian sector. We need to include a information management person in every project we design to be part of that, to enable them to have this capacity so they can perform and they can use, because we are going digital, whether we like it or not. It's happening. We need to adapt to this and we need to include it in our planning. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks. And for the other colleagues, if you could please use that sign. Yeah, that's next.
Okay, here we go. So my name is Smruti Patel. I'm the Director of Global Mentoring Initiative and also represent Alliance for Empowering Partnership. Thank you very much for bringing this thing about clients. Just to say, I used to work for the private sector for many years, and the reason why I switched was because I felt people were not at the center, and I want to really bring that in. Please don't call them clients. They're people, right? And really centering that in is so, so important. And that's about engaging with the heart, right? That's why we are here. And I would be really worried if a lot of the language that we're using, we're adopting from the private sector. Can we put our heart at the center of this and decide on what we are going to say and the language we use? The other part really struck me was still the conversation is centered around the internationals. It's not centered on the people. It's not centered on the countries where all this is taking place. How do we make sure that the international system is contributing to the collective capacities of the countries, with the people that they can work for themselves and are able to deal with those things that happen in the countries? It's all about our mandate, our mission. This is what I hear. It's your mandate, your mission. What about them? How will you contribute to that? And the donors, please, the way you are funding is actually fragmenting things instead of looking at the collective capacities to ensure that the countries can deal with this themselves, and there's local capacities to do that. So I think there's a lot of work to be done around that, because I feel like right now we're breaking everything up into agile project, this, that. But what's the bigger picture, right? What are we really trying to do? What are we trying to contribute to those countries? It's not about us. It's about them, because a lot of the humanitarian language is about, oh, we are putting money there for the solidarity. We're going in solidarity. I want to know how you're showing up your solidarity. Right now, it doesn't look good, right? Because we are just there to get them to compliment us rather than us complementing and supporting to do what they need to do for their own people. Really, let's put that at the center, because I still keep hearing, I love the agile and all the language, kind of some of the approaches to find the solutions, but let's be careful about the language. And please, can we engage with the heart, right? And the will come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think the key takeaways from both your comments and the comments earlier, it's more of the way we think, the way we work, and it's the mindset that needs to change as well, because it will help a lot what we want to achieve. So yes, our next, please. And we can use this send watch.
I'll keep it short.
All right, that's good.
Okay. So my name is Leylan. I'm doing an internship at the Center of Humanitarian Action, and I'm quite new to the field. So I have so many questions, but I'll keep it short. I'll ask just one, complementing on what Kore said about the power balance, that if the power has to be balanced in the future, that the donors have to be willing to give part of this power up for like local actors. And I have to ask myself, what actually is the incentive for like big players and for donors to actually give a part of their power? Because on the part of the local actors, it's obvious why they need that, because they have more expertise on the ground. They want to deliver like better help for people. But what about the big players? What's the incentive? Why should they do that? I would ask myself if I was a big player.
And it is always true. I mean, letting go the power, and that's also voluntarily, it's not easy. So what's in there for the donors, for the bigger players? So any reflection, any thoughts? Yeah.
Thank you very much for this question. Power imbalances. Okay. So I think this touches upon what I was talking about when I was talking about questions of accountability. Who are we accountable to? So it is, I would look at it this way. What we have to ensure is, or what we have to steer is basically how our money, how tax money is being spent. We are accountable to the German parliament, we are accountable to a taxpayer. Also, we work in the constraints of our federal budget law. And this is basically where the frameworks that we work in come from. So it is not that much about wanting to give up power or not wanting to give up power. I think the question is more about how can we really find a way to balance all these constraints with the agility that we like and the flexibility that we need and the participatory approaches that we would like to have. I think that is something that we have to look at. And I also think that this shift in behaviors and roles is not something that is in the responsibility of the donor alone, but this is also something that we have to engage in a joint discussion. And is, of course, also a question of how do intermediaries see themselves and what responsibility are they willing to give up or pass on to local partners, of course. I hope this answered your question.
Thanks, Sonia. So we have some feedback, question, comments online. So over to you.
Exactly. There are actually two questions to Darina and one question maybe to one of the other colleagues. I'll let you to decide, Saki, whom to raise it to. So maybe let's start from Ethiopia. That Abu Wodayu, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, from the Vaku Gutu Foundation, is asking Darina, what is the major Scrum manager and intermediary regarding response to affected communities, local organization, have more close than any donor or INGOs, including culture and norms, how we balance their value and role more close to donors than intermediary, because they first responders for the communities are the local organizations. And maybe to follow up on that one, there's a second question similar to that from Kamar Iqbal from the Pak Mission Society and national NGO working in Pakistan. Do we have any concrete examples for implementing agile management and humanitarian programming? The weakness of agile management includes lack of cross-professionally trained teams available and problems with workflow coordination, how to overcome these challenges. And maybe to Rajan, the same comment from Kamar, just to underline what you had mentioned earlier on with regard to the Together project. The aptitude and shared visioning among all the partners of the Together project is one of the key elements and importances. And then last but not least, a question from Germany, raised by Katharina Hammett from Welthungerhilfe. She's also asking about the agile management and examples. So what would this mean in terms of project management and flexibility? And to also contractual arrangements and donor regulations, how to change those in order to enable a more agile management and humanitarian and development projects. She didn't raise it or question it to any specific person, but maybe, Sonia, you want to comment on that one. Thanks.
Yeah, so Darina, maybe you can go ahead with the questions you have.
Yes, thank you. I have many thoughts from the discussions and also from the other inputs. I will try to pour all my input into one, just looking at the time. So apologies if I cannot answer to every concrete issue raised. First of all, there are many examples of actually also full-flung agilely managed projects. Shivangi is has one example, but there are also studies of applying it in DRC, in Mali, in Uganda, in so many different contexts and so many different projects. It's about food security. It's about WASH. So many different sectors also. So of course I can collect the examples in the literature and post them online if you are interested to learn of these examples. One of the most well-known examples is a project by RSC and Mercy Corps. It's called the ADAPT project, and they worked in Niger and Sierra Leone, Myanmar, Liberia, Uganda, Syria, Central African Republic, Chad, Nigeria, and Yemen. So if you look up the ADAPT project of Mercy Corps and RSC, you'll find some fabulous examples. There's also studies of how effective this agile management can be. And it really it was a study in Mali, and the result was really, it was a more effective, more relevant project that came out of this agile approach as compared to the traditional approach. So there's much evidence out there. I can go on hours to explain them. But I think we were talking about, the underlying power imbalances, about the underlying mistrust, about the underlying, accountability towards donors. So I think the point that I wanted to make here is we need to have default ways of working that allow us to have trust, that foster communication and exchange, and eye-level working relations. And I think the agile concept can be one way of establishing this sort of team spirit and collaborative approach. Of course, there are many other options, but this is just one tool or one approach that we can use. And then now to the facilitating role, like the Scrum manager, right? So I think that is really key in each and every project. It doesn't have to be an international organization. It doesn't have to be a local organization. It's just we have to find and define this facilitating role and think this facilitating role with each and every project. We don't only need donors, we don't only need project managers and project coordinators or whatever. We need somebody who makes sure that everybody has all the right information they need, that everything is transparent, and then there is a mutual exchange between all the team members. I think that is something which is missing in many of the humanitarian projects that at least I know. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I have many more points to raise.
Yeah,
but
thanks, Darina. And I'm just looking at the watch, so we have 1 minute to go. I think, Sonia, you wanted to share something? So let's try to be on time. I think we will be the first panel to finish on time. So, yeah.
All right, so on the question about the constraints, the budget code and everything that we work in and how to enable for more agile management, I think there's two things to that. So the easy way is really, and that is what we already do, looking into how we can use the framework that we have and enable for as great flexibility as possible or agility as possible. This can, for example, come down to the question of how do our log frames look like? How do we formulate outputs and outcomes and milestones? And how can we be flexible here? Or how, let's say, how detailed do these target formulations or ideas of outcomes have to be? So the more general one is here, the more flexibility one has while implementing the project, I would say. And then one could go over or with earmarking, via earmarking, and look at particular sectors or regional contexts that a project should be implemented in. But here again, one could really control the flexibility that one wants to give. I think, as I said, accountability is a constraint. So here, what is needed to enable for greater agility or to make a pilot that we already have or many pilots that we already have a good practice is, and that has been mentioned, I think, by one of the discussants or from the plenary already, what we need is trustful partnerships, strategic partnerships. So the communication has to work, transparency has to be there, and then within the leeway that we already have, we can really become more agile and flexible. And then when it really comes to changing budget law, legal conditions that really dictate the way we work, then it is, of course, the question who to address. And it is maybe not in the, let's say, in our, not a possibility of the humanitarian divisions or of us together with partners of changing that. That is probably the question of how also partners lobby and who they address. And this might be over really the international discourse and grand bargain, but of course also parliamentarians and other resorts that might have or that might be placed to change these conditions better than we are.
Thanks, Sonia. And I'll take this opportunity to thank all the panelists, all the colleagues who joined over here and online. So thank you very much. And I think we come back 12:45, which is the Berlin time, local time over here. So thank you.